Today's topic for discussion is derivative contracts, right? I don't know whether you are familiar with this word, whether you have heard about it previously, but I presume that you are not familiar with this word. So we will begin with understanding this particular term in a very simple manner, and then we'll move over to the advanced understanding. Right? So I repeat it once again that today's topic that we will be discussing, that we'll be deliberating upon, is understanding of derivatives as a financial instrument. If you remember, in the previous two classes, we had discussions on traditional financial instruments like equity, debt. Then we talked about mutual fund, and then exchange traded funds also. That day I told you we'll be dealing with the derivative instruments, although we had a mention about derivatives during that discussion, but I told you that we'll be dealing with the idea of derivatives in a separate class. So today we have a separate class for derivatives, and maybe we will continue this class for another day because it's a very lengthy topic. This topic is basically taught as a separate course in premier business institutes, right? But considering our limitations, we have kept it as a topic in your course, Indian financial system, because it's a very important financial instrument that is almost traded globally now, right? Many people argue that financial markets are incomplete without having this financial instrument. Okay, so there won't be the expected development, happening in the financial markets unless and until financial markets allow a space, certain space for this instrument as well to be traded there, right? So let's begin our journey towards understanding of this very peculiar, very unique instrument, unique financial instrument, which is known as derivatives, right? Now, from this slide, let's try to understand the dictionary meaning of this word. Now, do you know what's the dictionary meaning of this word? It simply means subsequent. That is, any substance or anything which is derived or obtained from something else that is already there. Right. So derivative is, the dictionary meaning of the word derivative is that uh, it is anything or something which is derived from or obtained from something else that is already there. So for a derivative contract, we need to think about, first of all, some asset, some commodity, some thing that already exists there, and then from that thing a derivative can be created, right? You can think about very ordinary examples. Ice. Just think of ice. Ice is a commodity which is made from water. So ice is basically a derivative of water, right? Similarly, you can think about light of moon. Moon doesn't have its own light. Rather, it derives its light from the sun. So whenever we think about a shining moon, next comes to our mind the sun, because we know it very well that it borrows its light from the sun. So the moon derives its light from the sun. Okay, so this is how, or this is what is the layman's way of expressing what a derivative means, right? Let's move on. In the second slide, we will try to understand the derivatives in a more advanced manner, right? As you know it already, that we need to understand derivatives as a financial security, as a financial instrument. What does that mean? Now, from this statement which is there in this slide, we understand that a derivative is a financial instrument which allows its owner to take a sum of which allows its owner to risk a sum of money on the future price movement of an asset. So what happens essentially, this contract allows a person to risk a sum of money on the price of a certain asset or a certain commodity or something which is already there. So that's what makes to understand, derivative is basically a contract which can be done on something that already exists, right? So it can facilitate a person to take a bet on the price of some commodity. Think about apple, think about saffron, right? So through these contracts, people are not actually directly dealing into the commodities. Rather, they take a side bet. Rather, they bet on the price of such commodities, right? Now let's consider the example of poultry for the sake of understanding, right? Let's assume that there are two parties that have opposite views on how price of broiler chickens will evolve in future. On the basis of their individual inputs, one party believes that the price may go up, while as other party, contrast to this, feels that it may come down. If that is the case, then these two parties can come together and enter into a bet that they would agree to buy or sell some quantity of broiler chickens in future on a price that would be agreed today. So that is what is a derivative contract. Two parties come together and they agree for buying or selling something in future at a price which is agreed today. Now let's assume that they enter into a 3 month contract, right? Let's assume that the maturity of the contract which they are entering into, which will enable or facilitate them to buy or sell something in future. The maturity of that contract is 3 months. Price of the broiler chicken per kg today is 100 rupees. They agree to contract for 10 quintals of broiler chickens at the rate of 10,500 per quintal after 3 months, right? Now, at the expiry of 3 months, if price is up really, then buyer makes a gain, and if price has come down, then the seller is in profits, right? So these contracts are basically not win-win contracts. These contracts basically mean one person losing at the one person making money at the cost of the other person, or one person's loss becomes the gain for other person, right? So let me repeat it once again. Uh, let's assume that let me repeat it once again for the sake of your understanding. Let's assume that there are two parties that have opposite views on how price of broiler chickens will evolve in future on the basis of their individual outputs. Now somebody will argue why two people will have two different or contrast views. We always generally what happens in our lives, people generally differ on things, right? So one person might have a one view, the other person will have a contrast view. Same happens in the markets as well. Suppose if I believe that the price on a certain commodity will go up, maybe somebody else will be there whose faith or whose feelings will be opposite to me. He will think that the prices will obviously come. Now, both of us in the markets will be actually acting upon certain inputs. I may have a certain type of input which may make me believe that the prices will go up, and the other party on the contrary will have different kind of information which will make him to believe in a different sense, in a different manner, right? Now, on the basis of their individual inputs, of, of these two parties, one party believes that the price may go up, while as the other party, contrast to this, feels that it may come down. If that is the case, then these two parties can come together and enter into a bet. Thus, they would agree to buy or sell some quantity of broiler chicken in future on a price that would be agreed today. Now, let's assume that they enter into a 3 month contract. Price of broiler chicken per kg today is 100 rupee. They agree to contract for 10 quintals of broiler chicken at the rate of 10,500 per quintal after 3 months, right? Now, at the expiry of 3 months, if price is up really, then buyer makes a gain. Because why does he make a gain? Because he has been able to book broiler chickens at a lesser price through the derivative contract, right? Now contrast to this, if price has come down, then seller is in profits. How he is in profits? Because he has been able to sell his asset, his commodity at a higher price than what's prevailing right now in the markets, right? So depending upon how prices move in the future, they are going to decide the payoffs in favor of either of the parties. Now, if one party loses, the other party makes the money. One party makes the money at the cost of the other party. Let me repeat it once again. How do these two parties actually make the money? How they are able to make the money in a derivative contract, right? Basically derivative contracts are not meant to make the money. They are actually meant to help people hedge risk. But equally they have a potential that people can trade in them and then take risk. And if somebody takes risk, there is always a potential for a reward. There's always a potential to make profits, right? Now let's try to understand once again how people are able to make payoffs when they enter into derivative contracts, right? At the expiry of 3 months, if price of the asset that has been agreed to be purchased or sold by the parties in a derivative contract is really up, then in that case buyer makes the gain. Or if price has come down, then in that case seller will be in the profits. Now the question will be asked, how? Again, I'll repeat, this is because they agreed to buy and sell the asset at a certain price in advance. Price has been locked in advance, that is not going to change, while as the price of the same commodity in the markets will be freely operating, that will obviously change, right? Price in the contract is not going to change, but price of the commodity in the market will obviously change, right? So this is because they agree to buy and sell the asset at a certain price in advance, even though the price has changed over time, but they still can buy or sell at the price which is predetermined in this case. Now, the change in the price of this asset in future will decide which party makes money and which party does bear a loss, right? Let's move on. Now, the use of derivative contracts has been found back in time as past as 2500 years from the Aristotle's scriptures. I hope you know the name of Aristotle. He was a great Greek philosopher. Moreover, historical accounts reveal that trade of derivative contracts began with the introduction of futures contract on rice on the Dojima rice exchange since 18th century. The Dojima Rice Exchange was an exchange that was operated by rice brokers in Osaka, Japan. It's no more now. This exchange used to operate between 1697 AD to 1939 AD. Right now, from the scriptures, as I already told you, that the traces of the derivative contracts first ever being used in the history have been found from the Aristotle's scriptures. From those scripture records, from the scripture records of Aristotle, what do we understand? It has been found that Greek philosopher, there used to be a Greek philosopher before Aristotle. His name was Thales, right? So it has been found in the scriptures of Aristotle that the Greek philosopher Thales, who was a great mathematician and astronomer, decided to buy the exclusive rights to use all the olive presses of the town of Chios and Miletus after the harvest. Chios and Miletus were the two Greek towns, villages. One of them is today in Turkey, modern Turkey. Okay, so what did Thales do? He decided to obtain the exclusive rights to use in future all the olive presses. Presses is actually a machinery that is used to extract oil from the olives, right? So he decided to buy exclusive rights to use all the olive presses of the town of Chios and Miletus after the harvest, right? Since the deal was made in winter and there was no way to know if the olive harvest would be good, hence he was able to secure the contract at a lower price. The owners of the olive presses saw this as an opportunity to make up for at least some of the losses they would incur if the harvest turned out to be poor. Just imagine if somebody goes to an apple farmer and tells him, he will give him this much of money in advance for his crop, which is going to come next year. Now, this is obviously going to put the apple farmer in a dilemma. He will have to decide how profitable this offer is for him. If he takes this offer in lieu of believing that there won't be a good crop next year, am I clear? Then obviously it makes sense for him. In the same manner, when Thales went to the olive farmers and made his offer to them that he is interested in buying advance the rights of using, he went actually to the olive press owners and told them he would be actually interested in buying the rights of using all those olive presses in advance. Now olive press owners thought that it's a good offer, because they are not sure whether there will be a good crop ultimately in future or not, and whether they will be able to make the money. So they actually found the offer made by the Thales of Miletus a attractive offer, right? Am I clear? Now the owners of the olive presses saw this as an opportunity to make up for at least some of the losses they would incur if the harvest turned out to be poor. They felt that if harvest is really not good in the future, then they would be subject to the losses. So Thales' offer was basically something in advance, which was helping them to cover had there been such a situation in which they were not able to make good money. Am I clear? Now, fortunately for Thales, the harvest was excellent, and demand for olive presses shot up, and he made a huge profit by renting all the olive prices which he had purchased at a very high cost, right? Now the question may be asked that did Thales make a bet? क्या Thales ने एक bet की? The answer obviously is no. Actually, what did Thales do? Let's try to understand that. Actually, those days philosophers were treated as worthless people. The thinking was that those people who could not do anything turned to philosophy. Now, Thales wanted to dispel this notion. With his great knowledge of astronomy, he could predict that in the coming year, due to good rainfall, there will be heavy olive crop, which would lead to a great demand for olive presses. Right? Using this knowledge, he understood if he purchased in advance rights to use all the presses, then he could make a lot of money at the time of harvest. Right? Now, this information was not available neither with the farmers nor with the olive press owners. Right? This information was only available with the Thales just because of the fact that he had good knowledge of astronomy and then predicting weather with the help of astronomical movements. Right? Now he proved that. Now doing this finally helped him to disprove the thinking that philosophers were worthless people. He proved that philosophers were not for making money. However, if they wish so, they could do that easily using their extraordinary knowledge. Am I clear? So all this story, all these accounts, tell us that probably derivatives were used, first time in the history, you know, uh, first time in the history, somewhere around 620 BCE to 546 BCE during the times of Thales, right? Now, what are derivatives? Question maybe now asked, what is a derivative contract? Now let's turn towards understanding a few important things about derivative contracts. Let's try to analyze the derivative contract and then from its different features and drawbacks, try to understand what this contract is actually all about, right? First thing to be kept in mind is that derivatives are the financial contracts linked to an asset and not just the asset, right? So it's not just the asset. So somebody who is dealing in derivatives is not dealing actually in an asset. Rather, he is dealing in a certain another contract which is helping him to you know uh, trade or hedge risk on that particular asset, right? Second thing to be understood is that derivatives are deferred performance contracts. If we go to a spot market, we will be required to perform instantaneously. That is, if you go to a shop and we want to buy something, unless we make a payment, or else if shopkeeper is not ready to provide us credit, we won't be able to buy anything from there. Am I clear? But on the contrary, these contracts are considered or known as deferred performance contract. They don't require parties to perform instantaneously. Rather, the performance, which means either delivering an asset or making a payment on that asset, would be involved on in some time in the future, right? So it does not require performance by the parties upfront, as is otherwise done in cash or spot markets, right? The third party is that the third thing is that value of derivative contract is positively or negatively correlated with the value of the asset underlying such a contract. And finally, a derivative contract is unique because it has two markets where it operates, right? Generally, the other financial instruments which we discussed so far, like equity, debt, they have only one market. That market is considered cash market, spot market, wherein an investor can go and then either buy or sell the asset. But when we talk about a derivative, it operates in two different markets. One is the same cash or spot market, wherein the asset on which derivative contract is made trades. The other is a different market which is called futures market, which is called derivative market. This is the market which is meant for trading, transacting of the derivative contract, right? So a derivative contract is a unique contract because it has two markets where it operates. In one market, which is called futures market, its price is set or determined, whereas in the second market, which is called spot market, its payoff is determined. तो एक मार्केट में इसको हम खरीद सकते हैं और इसकी प्राइसिंग होती है, दूसरे मार्केट में इसको बेचा जाता है जहां पे पता चलेगा इस पे क्या पे ऑफ है, हमें इस पे नुकसान हुआ या हमें इसके ऊपर फायदा हुआ, राइट? मूविंग ऑन, this this slide shows you these are some of the examples. In finance we are talking basically about financial derivatives now, right? So in finance these are some of the examples of underlying asset on which derivatives could be made. Like, this slide tells you about stocks, stock indices, bond prices, interest rates, foreign exchange, and commodity prices. So all these, can represent the underlying for a derivative contract, or in other words we can say these are the assets on which, one can think about, making a derivative contract, right? Let's move on. Now, this is another way to look at the derivative contracts, right? This is another way to understand the derivative contracts. Now, try to grasp the derivatives in a very simple way. Let's try to grasp the concept of derivative contracts in a very simple way, right? This statement argues that a derivative is a side bet on anything. Okay? To understand this phenomena, think of a moment about cricket, right? What comes to your mind when you think about cricket? What comes to your mind next? Maybe next to your mind you start thinking about Indian Premier League or IPL. Now imagine a match between Kolkata Knight Riders and Royal Challengers Bangalore, right? The KKR takes the field with hopes of dominating RCB. If they really win the match, if they really, are successful in dominating RCB, in, recording a win over RCB, then what happens? If they really do so, they will get money, they will get more money and glory for the team and its owners. That is what is the purpose, right? So they have a direct investment in the game. I am talking about the two different matches, two different, teams, right? So teams have a direct, stake, or they have a direct investment in the game. Their, outcome of the game will decide, whether they make money or lose money, right? But the people who are on the stands may also have a financial stake. जो लोग स्टैंड्स में इस मैच को देख रहे हैं, उनको भी फाइनेंशियल स्टेक हो सकता है इस गेम के अंदर. वो फाइनेंशियल स्टेक उनका कैसा होगा? That financial stake could be in the form of a bet with a friend or a bookie. Many people, while two teams are playing a match at the same time, many others are there who are watching or who are busy in making bets on one team or the other team. Okay, so that is, an idea about, thinking how derivatives are actually dealt with in the financial market. So another way to look at the derivatives is that they could be a side bet on anything like interest rates, exchange rates, commodity prices. These all these things might be, trading, doing business in their individual markets, but they could be at the same time used in another market for creation of a contract, which is known as derivative, right? Moving on. Now, why derivatives? What is the purpose of derivatives? Derivatives को use करने का मकसद क्या है, right? Now, derivative instruments are not meant to help people raise capital as could be the case with traditional financial instruments like equity and debt. Last time we discussed about equity and debt, and I told you that time these are the instruments which could be used by joint stock companies or firms or those people that issue these instruments as instruments for raising capital in the market, right? Now, when we talk about derivative instruments, derivatives as financial instruments, we must keep it in mind that these are not like equity and debt. In that sense, they cannot be used for raising capital in the market, right? Then what are they? What are they? They are essentially financial instruments that can be used for hedging or trading. So their main purpose is not to help people for uh, investments and, raising capital. Rather, on the contrary, these are the instruments which are very special and unique and can be used for hedging and trading. Hedging means, minimizing one's risk exposure in the market. Trading means taking a position or making a bet on the prices, so that if one believes prices will go up, then if he buys, he will make profits, or if else he believes prices will come down, and then if he sells, he will obviously be finding an opportunity wherein he will make some money, right? For example, think of an exporter. When we say that the derivative instruments are very unique, that they cannot be used for investment or, raising capital purpose. Rather, they can always be used for hedging of risk or for trading. Let us try to understand this with the help of an example. Think of an exporter or an importer who might be waiting to receive or make payment in foreign currency in future, right? While it's so, they might have a worry. What is that worry? The answer is the fluctuations happening in the price of foreign currency that they might have done trade in. Am I clear? Okay. What are the benefits of derivatives? Derivatives are very vital instruments in financial market because they help in two ways. They can be used, in a very effective manner in two ways. One, they are used as a tool to hedge risk. So, if they help people to hedge risk, that's what makes people to believe that they complete the markets. Without them, the financial markets would be a place which won't be work for many people who might not be willing to take too much of risk, right? So if there are people who are not happy with too much taking of too much of risk, they are encouraged to enter the financial markets because they will have a mechanism of derivatives which will help them to minimize the unwanted or undesired risk from their portfolios, right? And then the second thing is that these contracts help in price discovery because if you look at the essence of a derivative contract, the requirement is that the two parties have to come together and decide a price which will be applicable to them in future. So essentially what is happening? Essentially, they are trying to discover the price which will be applicable to them in future, right? So in that sense, derivative contracts are used as instruments for price discovery in the financial market. So these are the two benefits which can be achieved or derived from the derivative markets, right? Now moving on, these are the types of the derivative contracts. This is the generic list of different types of derivative contracts. So we have in all four different types of derivatives like forwards, futures, options, and swaps. We'll discuss these contracts one by one in detail, right? Now, the types of derivative contracts can be classified in some other manner as well. Like, we have a broad classification of derivatives. The derivative contracts which are bilateral in nature, which can be transacted only between the two parties, or else the derivative contracts that are multilateral or trilateral at least in nature, which can only be contracted on a certain organized exchange, right? Now, OTC or over the counter contracts or bilateral contracts. Such contracts can be customized according to requirements of parties, but customization leads to illiquidity in such contracts, right? Illiquidity means that they can't be sold to others easily. Just think of a situation wherein you might be you know planning to buy apparels for yourself. Now you have two choices. Either you can go to the market, buy fabric, and get it stitched from the tailor, or else you can go to a branded shop and purchase their branded clothes. Am I clear? The one that you customized, those you cannot, offer or sell to others. The other which you brought from a branded, shop, if you are not happy with them, they can be sold to the others. Others can buy them, right? Because they might, suit their requirements as well. The apparels which we customized, they could probably be specific to our requirements only, right? So illiquidity means liquidity means the ability of something being sold, or uh, some ability of something to get itself translated or converted into cash, right? So if that ability goes, then we reach illiquidity. Then we say illiquidity. Illiquidity means that something cannot be sold to the other party easily, right? That is what is illiquidity. So when we talk about OTC contracts, which are bilateral in nature, and such contracts, since they are made only with two parties, only two parties are involved, two parties can easily customize or tailor make them according to their specific requirements. When such is the case, when such is the advantage, then on the other side, the disadvantage is that these contracts can be illiquid, that they cannot be sold to others. Am I clear? Against this, exchange traded derivatives or exchange traded contracts are generally trilateral or multilateral in nature, right? Such contracts are standardized. Opposite to the OTC contracts, which are customized, exchange traded contracts are standardized. What does that mean? That means they are designed by exchange on the basis of average requirements of the parties in the market. Hence, such characteristics makes them, more liquid in the market. Since they lack customization, there is no scope that they can be customized, keeping in view the individual requirements of the parties, right? So that's what makes us to understand that over the counter derivative contracts, which are bilateral in nature, which are made only between two parties, they can be customized, but they are not liquid. They cannot be sold to others in the market. On the contrary, exchange traded contracts lack customization. They cannot be tailor made. They are, standardized. They are just like ready made goods, ready made clothes. Am I clear? But that characteristics gives them a lot of liquidity. That means they can be sold to others in the market, right? Now take a look on different types of over the counter derivatives: forex forwards, currency swaps, interest rate swaps, currency options, and forward rate agreements. All of them are over the contract over the counter derivatives. Now look at the other side: interest rate futures, currency futures, equity options and futures, index options and futures, commodity futures. All these are exchange traded, derivative contracts, right? Soon you will be able to differentiate between a forex forward and an interest rate future, interest rate swap, and the equity option and future, right? Am I clear? Now let's move on. Now slide in this slide we try to understand the forward contract, because in the previous slide we had a mention about different types of derivative contract. On the top of the list was mentioned forward contract. Now let's try to understand what a forward contract is all about. Forward contract hota kya hai? Forward contract is oldest of all. When we talked about that contract which was made by Thales of Miletus some 2500 years back, it was actually forward contract, because he did that contract bilaterally with the Olive Press owners, right? So any contract which is bilateral in nature, which only two parties make mutually, could be known as a forward contract, right? Now what is a forward contract? Let's try to understand the forward contract with the help of looking at its different features, right? Forward contract helps two parties to buy or sell a certain asset on a mutually agreed price and delivery location on some future date. Now just imagine, just try to understand, just try to read between the lines. Okay, certain very important things have been mentioned in this statement, right? So I said that forward contract helps two parties to buy or sell a certain asset. Then listen to this carefully, on a mutually agreed price. So price has to be agreed mutually between the parties, and also the delivery location wherein that asset will be delivered. Okay, but on some future date, not today. So that's what is a forward contract, right? So actually in essence two parties come together and they sort out or agree about buying and selling a certain item or a certain asset on some future date. Okay, after working out what will be the delivery location and at what price that asset will be sold and purchased, right? So a forward contract is specific in terms of size. That means the two parties have to come together, and then decide about quantity, type of the asset, price, delivery location, and something very important, that is due date, right? And all these conditions are worked out by a seller and a buyer mutually at the time of finalizing or entering into this particular contract. Okay, so from this definition, from this statement, we understand that it requires just two parties to make a forward contract. These two parties have to be one buyer and the other seller. The next thing is the consensus. That consensus has to be arrived between these two parties about what kind of asset will be transacted and what will be the price, as well as the quantity and the place wherein that asset will be delivered by the seller to the buyer. Am I clear? So that is what is a forward contract. Okay, now moving on. In this definition we try to understand further things about the forward contract. The two parties that make a forward contract are known with different connotations in case of a derivative contract. In a simple contract, we call the two parties as buyer and seller. But here in a derivative contract, we refer the buyer as a person being long in the transaction. Similarly, a seller is called as the person being short in the position. So if we say long, it means buyer. If we say short, it means seller in the derivative terminology, right? That's it. Then when a forward contract is made, the parties pay nothing to each other. So this contract has a unique feature. It is called a contract which is absolutely purchased or taken home by the parties free of cost. What does that mean? That means that when this particular contract is transacted, the two parties actually do not exchange anything to each other. They don't pay anything to each other. Rather, the consequences of making payment or delivery actually arise are going to arise on some due date, right? So when a forward contract is made, the parties pay nothing to each other except making a commitment. And this commitment could be either formal or informal. It could be either in writing or it could be just verbal, right? So depending upon how parties are actually known to each other. If they are known to each other very well and trust each other, very much, then a simple informal contract is enough. If they don't know each other very well, then probably they will insist upon writing a few lines and then drafting a contract and getting it signed by each, right? Am I clear? So what we are talking about, when a forward contract is made, the parties actually pay nothing to each other except making this commitment, right? However, such a contract has payment and delivery consequences on the due date. But on the due date, each party has to come forward and do its part. The seller will be required to deliver the asset which he agreed to sell in the contract, and the buyer will be required to pay the price for the asset which he agreed to buy in the contract. Am I clear? Now, since both the seller as well as buyer need to perform on the due date, both of them have to perform. Seller has to deliver the asset, buyer has to make the payment. There is a possibility that either of them can default. Either of them will not do what is due to him. Like, seller will fail to make the delivery of the asset which he agreed to deliver in the contract. Similarly, buyer will fail to make the payment on account of purchase of the asset which he agreed to do in the contract. Am I clear? So if that is the case, then either of the parties, both the parties are actually posing each other or exposing each other to a kind of risk which is known as default risk. Am I clear? Let's repeat it once again. In case of forward contract, a very unique terminology is used which refers buyer as long and seller as short. Okay. In case of forward contracts, nothing is to be paid by the parties at the time of signing or entering into the contract. Rather, these contracts in that sense are brought by the parties absolutely free of cost, but the consequences for making a payment or delivering an asset are going to arise at the time of the maturity. Am I clear? This is what can actually lead both the parties at the hands of each other to a kind of situation, to a kind of risk which is known as default risk, right? Moving on. Let's try to understand a forward contract with the help of this example. Okay, let's assume that on January 2nd, 2016, an importer enters into an agreement with a local banker to buy 10,000 US dollars in 3 months at a price of 65 rupees per US dollar, right? Now, entering into this particular contract obligates the importer to pay Indian rupees 6,50,000 rupees for 10,000 units of US dollar currency on April 2nd, 2016, and the banker has to deliver the desired currency at a pre-agreed price, that is 65 rupees 65 INR per US dollar. Am I clear? Since both of them have actually agreed, both of them have entered into a forward contract wherein one party has agreed to buy foreign currency at a certain price, the other party has agreed to sell the foreign currency at a certain price. Importer has to pay in terms of Indian rupees and the banker has to deliver in terms of US dollars. Am I clear? So that's what makes their obligations at the time of the maturity. Okay. Now let's try to look at this particular contract in a more detailed manner, in a more detailed sense. This graph is going to show you what would be the cash flow and payoff consequences for these two parties when they enter into a forward contract of buying and selling of US dollar. Am I clear? Now imagine if on due date of the contract price of US dollar is less than strike price. Strike price is the price at which they have agreed to buy and sell currency, which is in the given context 65 rupees, right? Now imagine that if on due date of the contract price of US dollar is less than strike price, less than 65 rupees, right? Then the buyer or importer is at loss, because if he buys through the forward contract, he will be paying a higher price, he will be paying a higher rate. Am I clear? And the banker or the seller is at gain. Am I clear? Contrast to this, if price of US dollar on due date is greater than strike price, if it is greater than strike price, if it is greater than 65, let's 65, let's assume 70 is greater than 65, then in that case the buyer or importer is in gain and the seller or the banker is in loss. Am I clear? So since price can move in any direction, either it will come down or go up from the strike price, then that situation will have a propensity for either of the parties to default. Now you can imagine a banker cannot default, but there is always a possibility that the other party can default, which is the client, which is the customer, right? Am I clear? Is it clear? No. Now, depending upon what is the price of this asset, which is the US dollar, which is the foreign currency, in the spot market, in the current market, right? That will decide the payoff in favor of the buyer and the seller. Now, buyer is going to be in payoff. Buyer will make the profits if the price of the underlying actually goes up, and the seller makes the money when the price of the underlying actually comes down. Am I clear? How does it happen like that? ऐसा कैसे होता है? Okay, am I clear? Because in the first case, banker can buy at low in spot markets. When price of the underlying has come down, banker can buy at a low rate in the spot markets and sell at a higher rate in the forward contract. Am I clear? Similarly, when the price has gone up, then in that case the buyer will have the opportunity of buying the foreign currency at a lower price through forward contract and selling in the spot markets at a higher rate. Okay, so depending upon whether price come down or they go up, it represents a profit opportunity for either buyer or the seller in the given case, right? Let's move on. Okay. Now this slide tells you about the two key features of a derivative of a forward contract. We are right now talking about the forward contract. Forward contract is one of the derivative contracts which is bilateral in nature, which can be done only between the two parties. So here in this case we talked about two parties. One is a banker that agrees to sell the foreign currency, other is the importer which agrees to buy the foreign currency, right? Now let's try to understand the two important features of the derivative contract. Now look at the two features of a forward. In that case, in this contract, both buyer as well as seller have a potential to default. That's both of them have the possibility of not to perform as per terms of the contract. Now question arises, when will each of them default? The buyer has the incentive to default when price the buyer has incentive to default when price in spot market falls, as I already explained to you. Because if he buys through the forward contract, then he will have a belief that he is paying more than what he would be required to pay if he buys from the spot markets, right? Okay, so the buyer has incentive to default when price in spot market falls, and the seller will have incentive to do the same when price goes up. Because when price goes up, the seller will feel that why he would sell through the forward contract, why not in the spot markets? Because there he will command to sell the same asset at a higher price than what he had previously agreed in the forward contract, right? So buyer has incentive to, we are talking about how does default arise, what makes the parties to default. Am I clear? So the buyer has incentive to default when price in spot market falls, and the seller will have incentive to do the same when price goes up. But why? Question will be asked, वो ऐसा क्यों करेंगे? It is because if price is less in spot market, then buyer may feel that he will have to pay more if he buys under a forward. Similarly, if price is high in the spot market, then the seller feels that he will get less if he sells under forward, right? So this is what makes them to actually compare their payoffs across two different markets: forward market, wherein they made a forward contract, and the spot market, wherein the asset on which forward has been made is actually being transacted, right? So that comparison actually makes them to realize that they are either losing money or gaining money, and the party that feels is losing money will have tendency to default in favor of the other party, right? Hence, Hence, depending upon the condition, the parties may try to break the contract by defaulting on their obligation. They can do so because both the parties have paid nothing when they got into the contract. They have a potential to default in favor of each other, because if you remember, I told you previously that these contracts are actually brought home absolutely free of cost. So initially, when the parties make this contract, they don't give or exchange anything. So nothing of them is at stake. If nothing of them is stake, then they have every motivation, every incentive, or every reason that if they feel that the contract is not paying them well, they will walk out of it and then go for a default in favor of other party. That's what will lead to the facing of losses on behalf of that particular party, right? Now in this slide, let's try to understand. Okay, let's try to understand different characteristics of, again, different characteristics of the forward contract. All right. Hence, forward contracts are preferred because parties that want to enter into it are free to decide various terms and conditions of such contract. If you remember, we discussed already that forward contracts are bilateral in nature. That is what gives them, flexibility, that the two parties can customize them, tailor-made them according to their, own individual requirements. Right? Am I clear? So, forward contracts are most often preferred because parties in such contracts are free to design them according to their individual requirements, right? Am I clear? In contrast, they are criticized, but they are preferred for this nature, that they give the parties a lot of flexibility as far as customization is concerned. But on the contrary, they are criticized as well. But what for they are criticized? Okay, on one side they give a lot of flexibility for customization, but on this other side, when when the contract as and when as a contract actually increases the flexibility, increase the customization, the liquidity actually comes down. Am I clear? The contract becomes more illiquid. Am I clear? That is, it cannot be offered to others in the market if the parties want to sell it to anybody else in the market, right? Am I clear? So in contrast, these contracts, forward contracts, are criticized for being illiquid and for being prone to default risk. So there are two problems. We have already discussed them. The feature or the beauty is that the contract is bilateral in nature. That's what lends it flexibility in terms of allowing the parties that they can customize it and make it suitable to their individual requirements, right? On in contrast, these contracts are illiquid in nature. Okay, and they are also prone to default risk. Why they are prone to default risk? This is something which I have discussed already. Am I clear? Because they are taken by the parties free of cost. Nothing is at stake. As the parties move in time, when they make a contract, the contract creates cash flow consequences for them. And if those cash flow consequences are positive, they will prefer to stay in the contract or the country. If those cash flow consequences are negative for them, this is what will make them to think about walking out of the contract and then resorting or going for a default, right? Am I clear? All right, let's move on. So they are illiquid because they are inherent, because of their these contracts, forward contracts, are illiquid because of their inherent flexibility to allow parties to customize the forward contract and make it more specific to the two parties rather than being attractive to many people in the market. Similarly, they contain default risk because in forward both the parties are required to perform on due date. For example, in such a contract, seller may have to deliver the asset to be sold, and the buyer may be required to pay the price for the asset. In such a condition, both the parties face uncertainty about whether the other would perform on the due date or not. Am I clear? So that's what makes forward contracts exposed to the default risk. Am I clear? I repeat it once again. The forward contracts are highly preferred by the people in the markets because of their nature of providing them flexibility in terms of the fact that they can be customized and made suitable to the requirements of the individual parties. But on the contrary, these contracts are highly liquid, that they cannot be sold to others in the market for a price. And then also, since these contracts are available free of cost to the parties, that's what makes them prone to the default risk. And then a party will always be at exposure of facing a loss from the other party if the other party doesn't perform, which is actually due on it. Okay. Moving on. Now, future contract, that is the second type of derivative contract, overcomes these two difficulties of the forward contract. So forward contract, we already discussed, is a bilateral contract which is done mutually between the two parties. These two parties could be anybody, like any, Ram and Sham, Tom, Dick, okay? Or it could be one party, the banker, other party, the customer. But when we talk about futures, in case of futures, the future contract cannot be done bilaterally. Future contract is a forward contract which is made on an exchange, organized exchange. So in short, you must remember or keep it in mind that futures contract is basically nothing but a contract which is offered by a stock exchange, which is offered by an organized exchange. So what happens essentially? There are two parties already in the market who could otherwise do a forward contract, but then stock exchange comes or the organized exchange comes and it tells these two parties that it will step in between them and overcome the difficulties which they can otherwise fall in if they enter into a forward contract. You remember it already that when two parties enter into a forward contract, they have to face the difficulties in terms of two things. One is default by either of the party, and the other is the illiquidity, that if either of the party wishes to square up, liquidate his contract by selling it to another, it won't be possible. The other party won't find the contract attractive because this contract is attractive only to the two parties as it has been customized or designed considering the requirements of only the two parties, right? Am I clear? Now these difficulties, these difficulties can be overcome. These drawbacks which we found in the forwards contract can be overcome if we move to the futures contract. Now futures is actually nothing but a exchange traded version of forward contract. The only difference is that there are again two parties. One is a buyer and the seller. The third party is the exchange, whose job is actually to intermediate between the seller and the buyer and ensure that the derivative contract or the derivative transaction takes place in a smooth manner after overcoming what they had actually faced when they were into a forward contract. Am I clear? So let's introduce futures contract. This is a contract that overcomes the main flaws of forward contract, right? Futures contract are typically more liquid than forwards and they are almost free of any default risk. दो प्रॉब्लम्स जो हमें देखी कि फॉरवर्ड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में एक वो लिक्विड है और दूसरा उसके अंदर डिफॉल्ट रिस्क है, काउंटर पार्टी डिफॉल्ट रिस्क है. कोई भी पार्टी दूसरी पार्टी को डिफॉल्ट के साथ एक्सपोज कर सकती है और उसको लॉस फेस करना पड़ेगा. ये दोनों फ्लॉज, दोनों प्रॉब्लम्स को जो फॉरवर्ड के अंदर है फ्यूचर ओवरकम करता है. कैसे ओवरकम करता है दैट वी विल अंडरस्टैंड. ओके, नाउ क्वेश्चन मे अराइज एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, व्हाट इज अ फ्यूचर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट? फ्यूचर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट क्या है? The answer is that a future contract is nothing but a forward contract which is done not bilaterally between the two parties, but which is a contract which is done with the help of a stock exchange, right? So the difference is that here there are not only two parties, but there is also a third party which is a stock exchange. So in case of futures contract, there is basically a third party involved, right? Am I clear? Move on. Now let's try to understand more about futures. अब futures में क्या होता है? Now what makes us futures highly liquid? Futures कैसे highly liquid contracts बन जाते हैं? Okay, that is high liquidity means that they can be traded easily with others in the market, right? They are made liquid because an exchange standardizes them. They are not designed, they are not created considering the unique requirements of two parties. Rather, future contracts, when they are designed, when they are made on the exchange, they are made considering the requirements of large number of customers in the market, right? Just think about again that basic example. When we go to a branded shop, they have standard, sizes. Those standard sizes are actually decided on the basis of the average size requirements of the customers in the market. So that's what makes them applicable to more and more people in the market. But when we talk about tailoring a suit from a certain tailor, customizing a certain suit from a tailor, that suit would be, designed only according to the measures or size requirements of a particular person. Am I clear? That suit won't be applicable to large people in the market. Am I clear? So if that person wishes to sell that suit later on to somebody in the market, he won't find a buyer so easily. Am I clear? That won't be a problem if the same suit is actually brought from a branded store, because a branded store always, keeps suits that measure or that have, standard sizes. Am I clear? So same is the case when we talk about, when we differentiate between forward contract and exchange contract. Since exchange contract is, a exchange traded version of a forward contract, so when exchange makes forward contracts for the parties who are there in the market, they design such contracts keeping in view the requirements of large number of customers in the market. When that's done, that is what automatically lands or makes such contracts more liquid, or we can say more acceptable to lot of parties in the market. And since when that is the case, such contracts after being, brought from the exchange, can be easily sold to others in the market as well, to the subsequent, investors as well in the market. Am I clear? So these contracts, future contracts, are liquid because an exchange standardizes them according to requirements of large number of customers in the market. So before being offered by the exchange, they are designed on the basis of characteristics like quality, quantity, month, and place of delivery. So what does stock exchange do? They, carefully take care of the quality, number of, assets, the maturity, the place of delivery, about the contract, and then that's what gives rise to a contract which is known as futures contract. Am I clear? Hence, a futures contract will be identical in terms of its features for everyone in the market at a given time. Am I clear? Okay. Now, question may be asked, where do these futures contract trade? Okay. So after all this, question may be asked, where do futures trade in India? The answer is that they trade on organized stock exchanges that include two prominent stock exchanges like National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange, which are, in short known as NSE and BSE, and the two commodity exchanges. One is called Multi Commodity Exchange and the other is called National Commodity Exchange. In short, they are referred as MCX and NCDX. Okay. So the one set of, exchange exclusively deals in derivatives which are made on stocks, indices, bonds, and other financial instruments, and the other set of exchange deals in futures contracts that are exclusively made on commodities. Okay. Now let's see in the next slide what is the domain of each, right? NSE and BSE offer futures on individual stocks, indexes, currencies, gold, silver, crude oil, and government securities, right? They also offer option contract on individual stocks and indices. What's an option? This is something we'll be discussing on some other occasion. Am I clear? Then MCX and NCDX, these offer futures and options on commodities basically, right? Commodities basically, right? So these are some of the commodities that are traded on these exchanges like gold, copper, crude oil, natural gas, cotton, cardamom, sugar, turmeric, wheat, and basmati. Now, an important question that may be asked is that how to close a futures contract. अब किसी आदमी ने मार्केट में फ्यूचर्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट खरीदा है तो उस फ्यूचर्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को क्लोज कैसे किया जा सकता है? ओके, क्योंकि हमेशा वो आउटस्टैंडिंग होगा, बिकॉज these contracts are actually these contracts actually have deferred time implications. They will remain outstanding for some time in future. It is not like going to the market and then buying something and closing the transaction immediately, right? So when somebody enters into a derivative contract, whether that is a forward or future, he will actually have something outstanding in his favor until that contract is outstanding, until that contract is not actually settled. Right? Am I clear? Now, question may be asked: how is a futures contract which is brought from an exchange closed? How that can be closed? Am I clear? Now, suppose if some of us or any of us purchase a futures contract from the stock market, how will he finalize, see the end of that contract, right? Now let us see how futures contracts are closed. Okay, one simple way is that anyone who holds a futures contract can close it by taking an offsetting position in the market before due date. That is, sell futures contract if it was long earlier, or buy futures contract if it was short earlier, if it was short position earlier in the market. इसका मतलब ये है, जैसे आपने बैलेंस शीट में देखा होगा, एक इक्विटी कॉन्सेप्ट है. इक्विटी कॉन्सेप्ट मतलब जितनी लाइबिलिटीज लेफ्ट साइड में है उतनी ही एसेट्स राइट साइड में होती हैं. इसी तरीके से एक्सटेंडिंग दैट फिनोमेना ऑन दी डेरिवेटिव कॉन्टेक्स्ट, इसी तरीके से अगर कोई आदमी पर कोई डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट परचेज करता है तो उसका मतलब ये है कि उसकी लाइबिलिटी है, उस लाइबिलिटी को वो स्क्वायर ऑफ करेगा बाय एन एसेट. सो इफ ही हैज परचेज्ड a derivative contract, he will sell the same derivative contract before due date. That's what will enable or make him to square up his outstanding towards the exchange. Am I clear? Similarly, if he has sold a derivative contract, what does selling a derivative contract mean? It means that if he has agreed to sell some asset through a derivative contract on a stock exchange, he will buy the same asset before the due date, so that his outstanding is squared up, it is cleared. Am I clear? That is one way to close the derivative contract. So this is something which will happen at the initiative of the party itself. पार्टी खुद ही कुछ करती है तो उसकी वजह से उसकी जो आउटस्टैंडिंग होती है मार्केट में टुवर्ड्स द स्टॉक एक्सचेंज, उसको क्लोज किया जाता है, उसको खत्म किया जाता है. दूसरा तरीका क्या है? दूसरा तरीका जो है वो स्टॉक एक्सचेंज की तरफ से. इफ पार्टी डज नथिंग and the contract remains outstanding even on the due date on the stock exchange. Am I clear? Right? Then exchange steps in. Then exchange will close it by settlement, either in cash or by actual delivery of the asset. फिर उस केस में एक्सचेंज उस कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को क्लोज करेगा, और क्लोज करने के दो तरीके हैं, या तो कैश सेटलमेंट होगी या उस डिलीवरी उस एसेट की डिलीवरी इफेक्ट की जाएगी जिसके ऊपर डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया गया है. समझ में आ रही है बात? मोस्ट ऑफ द फ्यूचर्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट आर closed through cash settlement. So I am using interchangeably derivative and futures. Right now I basically mean futures contract whenever I say derivative, right? So most of the futures contracts that are made on the stock exchange, they are settled or they are closed through cash settlement. Cash settlement का मतलब क्या है? Let us try to understand that. Cash settlement is settling the contract by paying the difference between the strike price and the spot price. अब देखिए, एक प्राइस वो है जिस पे डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया जाता है, दूसरा प्राइस वो है जिस पे वो एसेट जिसके ऊपर डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया गया है मार्केट में ट्रेड हो रहा है. अब ये हमेशा होगा कि डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट का प्राइस जो है वो स्पॉट मार्केट प्राइस से डिविएट करेगा, चाहे ज्यादा होगा या कम होगा. एम आई क्लियर? अब उस चीज की वजह से डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को कैश सेटल किया जा सकता है. कैश सेटलमेंट में क्या होता है? One party will pay the difference to the other party and then the contract will be closed, or else the other party will pay the difference to the next party and then also the contract will get closed. Am I clear? Now how to decide which party has to pay and to which party? Am I clear how to decide that? Okay, I will repeat it once again. Cash settlement is settling the contract by paying difference between strike price and the spot price. Now the question is how to decide who of the parties will pay. The answer is seller if the strike price is less than spot price, and the answer is buyer when the strike price is greater than the spot price. Am I clear? Spot price here means the prevailing market price of the underlying asset in the futures market, right? Now in this slide, let's try to take one more look at the futures and forwards and try to differentiate them. Now forwards are private contracts. They contain performance risk which is at the hands of both the parties that enter into the forward contract. No cash exchanges hands at the inception when the contract is made, and these contracts are formally not regulated. This is why, if you remember, I told you that they can be both formal as well as informal. They can be both in writing as well as verbal, right? Now when we look at futures contract are traded on the organized stock exchanges. They are standardized in terms, so there is no performance risk, right? So they are standardized in terms, so there is no liquidity risk. They are highly liquid in nature. There is a clearinghouse and margin system, okay, which enables the stock exchange to minimize the risk of default that is arising, that is happening at the hands of the two parties. Am I clear? And this contract has statutory regulations, or in other words, you can say it is a contract which operates or trades in a regulated market, right? Moving on. Now, finally, I am presenting in front of you an example which will help you to understand how derivative contracts can be used for hedging. Am I clear? So let's understand how, futures contracts can be, for that matter, used for hedging risk by a farmer. Okay. This slide shows you historical price data of cadmium during year 2019. This data is all hypothetical, and it has been created for the sake of illustrative purpose only, for the sake of making you people understand. Okay. Now let's come to the point and understand how can a futures contract be used for you know hedging the risk. By hedging the risk, we mean to say minimizing the risk. When we say minimizing the risk, what kind of risk we are actually referring to? Am I clear? As you can see from this information, the price of the cadmium has historically, fluctuated very much. Am I clear? So for a seller, there will always be a worry when crop is about to come. He may lose if prices come down. Am I clear? Similarly, for a buyer, there is always going to be a worry when he wants to purchase if prices at that time actually go up. Am I clear? So depending upon if prices are volatile, if prices move up and down, then they pose risk to both buyer as well as seller in the market. Am I clear? Now question arises, how would a seller actually hedge his risk of prices falling if he is expecting at some point of time crop of the cardamom and then wants to sell that crop in the market? Am I clear? So with the help of, is it clear? Sorry, I couldn't show you the PowerPoint slide previously. So this slide actually shows you the hypothetical data of the cadmium during the year 2009. Okay. Now, with the help of this example, which is presented to you, I can let you people understand how futures contract can be used for hedging of the price risk. Price risk is the risk that arises due to the fluctuation in the price of cadmium over the past, okay, or in the future, right? So this slide shows you historical price data of cadmium during the year 2009. This data is all hypothetical and is meant for illustrative purposes only, just for the sake of understanding, right? Moving on, let's go through this example and then try to understand how futures contract can be used by a farmer or by a potential seller of a crop to hedge his risk, which he is confronting due to the fluctuation in price happening in a certain agricultural commodity in which he is having exposure, right? A farmer expects a crop of 1000 kgs of cadmium in the month of October 2019 at a price of 495 per kg, right? The current price per kg is 490. The farmer fears that the price of the cadmium could go down. Assume that a 3-month futures contract comprising of 100 kgs due in the month of October is traded on the stock exchange at the rate of 495 per kg. The farmer may be required to sell 10 contracts worth 4,95,000 rupees to hedge his position because he's expecting 1000 kgs of cardamom in the month of October, right? So if he buys a futures contract, this futures contract will help him to lock the price, which will be applicable to him when the crop is actually ready for sale in the market. Am I clear? So farmer may be required, since each contract is worth 100 kg, size is standardized. So farmer may be required to sell 10 contracts worth 4,95,000 to hedge his position. On due date, price per kg of cardamom in the spot market is 500. Since he brought a contract at 495, so by virtue of this contract, he will be making a gain of 5 rupee per kg, right? So that's what would come to an overall gain of 5,000 rupees, right? So if he prefers to sell his crop through the futures contract, then he will make a gain of 5,000 rupees, right? But if else he prefers to sell his crop in the spot market, am I clear? Then there will be If he prefers to sell his crop in through the futures contract, there will be a loss of 5,000 rupee because he agreed to sell the crop at 495 rupee per kg. But now, since the price of this crop is 500 rupee in the spot market, by selling it there he will be making a gain of 5,000 rupee. So what he will do, he will get his he will prefer to have his futures contract settled in cash and face a loss of 5,000 rupee there, and this loss will be compensated or made good by what profit the farmer actually made by selling his crop in the spot market or in cash market. So ultimately the position of the farmer is unaffected, neither he made any loss nor he made any gain. So that is what is the purpose of hedging. That's what is the purpose of actually entering into a futures contract. Okay, so ultimately the farmer was actually able to sell his crop at the price which he had expected, which is 495 in the given case. Okay, so that's all from my side. If there are any questions, let's look at them at